Crypto investors hold their breath as they await important macro updates in a big week. We cover this right now in the Collective Shift weekly recap, actionable insights and a breakdown into the crypto market, all in under 30 minutes. Simon, pretty sure we won't need 30 minutes in particular this week. It was a rather flat and quiet week in crypto.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you were sounding very hopeful there in the intro, but it has been a very quiet week. I think that's a level of apathy for the market. I guess, the prices are down, people who are really scared have left, and then there's just the ones who know that this is just more of a bump in the road of this kind of cycle. So I think that's a good sign. Maybe we're starting to be in an accumulation phase again.
Yeah, certainly. There's some other signs we'll get to later in the episode that I think reaffirm that outlook that we are kind of bottoming out. But yeah, for anyone who has been staying with us and paying attention, Bitcoin is actually up around 7% or so on the week. XRP and BNB, the very notable top performers there of the majors, up between 15 and 20% on the week. As we said last week, the biggest news was inflation in the US. That came out and was slightly better or slightly lower than expected. So we actually saw crypto and stocks sort of rebound or at least go up on the back of that data release. And now all eyes this week are on the Federal Reserve. But just a chart that I will get up here on my screen that did just reinforce how bad things are at the moment. Sort of what goes up must come down in many ways. And that was the ETF products over there. So CoinShares, their sort of industry leading report here, saying that we've had a fifth straight week of outflows there for, I guess, globally, the either ETFs or other similar instruments around the world for people to get exposure to Bitcoin. Total outflows over this period of 5 weeks is now just over $6 billion in US, that is, and also the 17th straight day of outflows. So again, not surprising when you look at the chart, but just another visualization for how bad things have been. But all to say, really, I think everyone is now in this state of just waiting. I think we've talked about tariffs. I think even last week we said April 2nd is the date to watch. That remains the case, with a lot of retaliatory tariffs expected from Donald Trump on April 2nd. And now also everyone's waiting to see what the Federal Reserve is going to say in their policy update this week. They will almost certainly hold rates steady, but what everyone is more interested in is what Jerome Powell has to say, which he also has a quite difficult task of, I suppose, trying to reassure the market that they are here in an event where things maybe worsen, but they also probably want to stay the course and also just not try to front run any Trump policies or whatever, because it is so uncertain. So I think any investors who are wanting like a quick fix or anything spectacular from the Fed, I struggle to see that happening this week. And as we talked about last week, Simon, they have got about a 7 or 8 week gap. I think it's early May is their next update there. So that is by far the biggest news this week, but could end up just being another nothing burger while we're in this holding pattern.
It's definitely going to be a nothing burger, but Jerome Powell and just all chairmen of any centralized bank, they're very careful with their words because they know how much it signals to the market. So there's going to be enough people going, forensic scientists digging deep into every word he says, trying to create some kind of bullish or bearish narrative of it. But I think it's going to be fairly neutral as the market still adjusts to what Trump is doing. I think you kind of hit it on the head when you said that, Jerome Powell doesn't want to do anything that's going to be in contradiction to Trump's, I guess, kind of plans at the moment. I think, they in a way want to work together on the economy. So I think there'll be a fairly neutral kind of tone to it. And just on the markets in general, I think the interesting thing to see is that we've had the US stock markets, the S&P 500, have 4 weeks of red in a row, which is not uncommon, but, it's rare for it to go much further than that. And I noticed that now this current weekly candle is turning green. So that's something I'll be watching quite intently to see if the stock markets have kind of, not recovered per se, but kind of adapted to this new world of Trump tariffs and, the fatigue of selling, or the fear probably more of selling, starts to dissipate. And I think that will translate into crypto as well. So it'll be interesting to see stock market movements, I think, as well, because I think that will be a fairly good indicator of where crypto might go.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also seeing the big key leaders of the Trump administration. Again, I think as we've talked about recently, a lot of investors are watching to see if they're going to say anything that indicates that, they're not happy with so much damage happening in stocks. As we've said, well, they've even rebounded a bit in recent days. But if they do continue bleeding, I think, as we've said, they may be at a threshold point where they do step in. But I think it is a fact that all indications and everything they're saying is still that, they're not really fussed with any short-term pain. They still think overall for the US economy, long-term, these aggressive tariffs are a net positive. So again, that's another factor to just monitor there. If they continue to just say, hey, not a big deal, that just gives people with capital on the sidelines no reason to come back in to risk on assets. So I think as we share similar views there, Simon, that I think they're still happy to see it go down. If it does happen to do so, I don't think they're going to be stepping in anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we said, they've got the put in place where the Federal Reserve can drop rates and print money and fiscal spending policy. So they've got that in their back pocket, and so they're in no rush.
Yeah, that's it. All right, Senator Cynthia Lummis here, reminding everyone that, I guess, hey, we're celebrating the Trump administration doing their own strategic reserve, but I think everyone sort of forgot there's this thing going on the sidelines here. There was a development last week, was there, Simon?
Yeah, there was. So the Bitcoin Act was introduced, I think, even before Trump got into office by Cynthia Lummis, and that was basically that they should purchase Bitcoin and put it into the balance sheet of the federal government. So it got rejected back then. Obviously now with a very pro-crypto administration in place, it looks like this will be pushed again into the parliaments to go through that, obviously rigmarole of the process of whether they will buy it. So I think the big kind of change is that back then Cynthia was saying that they would be selling gold to buy it, which I guess coincides to a degree with what Trump says, that there's no cost to the taxpayer if they increase this. And so I should take a step back and remember when everyone said that, they're going to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, Trump's going to create that, they're going to buy all this Bitcoin. Well, Trump never said any of the thing about buying Bitcoin. He just said he was going to create a reserve and not sell the ones they already had. It was kind of this bill that was been circling around that made everybody think that that's actually what was going to happen, is that Trump was going to start buying it. But he can't do that. He doesn't have that kind of power to spend the money like that. This Bitcoin Act does have that kind of power, but it's still in line with what Trump said, and that no cost to the taxpayer. So they were saying that still like looking at selling gold to purchase more Bitcoin, and they were talking about remittance from reserve banks that they would make, that they would use that money to sell gold. How that's not a cost to the taxpayer, I don't know, because if that's money coming in, money going out, I don't know. But I think they're just playing with the words, trying to figure out a way how they can buy more Bitcoin, basically. But I think this is a big sign that this is what people are going to latch onto now as our new thing for crypto Twitter and crypto in general, to be super bullish about, hey, they are going to do this, hey, they are going to buy our Bitcoin. I think that's going to be a big focus. And to be fair, it is a big deal, especially if it gets up, but I think there's a bit more time and probably back and forth with lots of government officials before this goes anywhere.
Yeah, certainly there. And another big development again around, latching onto, I guess, optimism in the Bitcoin space. Another thing have been noticing is, well, much the same story really, is people getting their hopes up that strategy, formerly MicroStrategy, will just continue to, I guess, carry the market on its shoulders. In many ways, they have been the biggest driver of this bull market for Bitcoin, or definitely a very, very significant part. And I think without them, it's absolutely true that Bitcoin would be significantly lower in price today. But that's not the case, and they've announced even more plans to purchase Bitcoin off the open market. So they did have their famous sort of 21-21 plan that they announced at the end of October last year. That is still, from my understanding, they're still around midway through that usage of that, up to $42 billion. And in addition to that, just last week they announced a another sort of 21 billion sort of stock offering, which is, through sales of, I'm just going to read it off here because it sounds pretty technical here, but an 8% Series A perpetual strike preferred stock, and it's called STRK there. So not the Starknet token, importantly, because that would not be good. But really, it's just MicroStrategy trying to test the water there of seeing if there's still more demand for people to get access to this yield, and in return, strategy will use that to purchase more Bitcoin. So I personally haven't actually read enough into it to know what instigated the idea of putting on an extra $21 billion US like sort of offering after they've already still working through their sort of 21-21 plan. But overall, so far, we've seen very strong appetite for, I guess, capital from the outside, people looking for yield, happy to sort of put that with strategy in these certain financial instruments that they are creating, whether or not they can get this extra up to 21 billion. As a Bitcoin investor and crypto investor overall, I hope that they can. But as we've always been saying, Simon, I think yes, this is great, but it would be nice to see some other sources of demand for Bitcoin coming through.
Yeah, definitely be nice to see other big buyers come into the space, but like Strategy is a company that is designed now pretty much to just buy Bitcoin. So them announcing they're going to buy more Bitcoin, not a shock to me at all. Like, it's still great that there's effectively a massive buyer coming into space, and effectively it's a sinkhole for Bitcoin because they supposedly won't sell ever. So it's a good thing. It pushes price up, takes supply out of the play. I'd love it if more companies do it there, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as we just alluded to at the top of the episode, really, we're in a sort of resetting, a cleansing period, I think, almost of crypto from, the heights that we saw late last year and just the, I guess, euphoric sort of conditions, particularly in things like meme coins, which just as quickly as they go up, everyone was sort of aware that, hey, the party would end quite quickly. I think a lot of people, including myself, thought it would go on for quite a bit longer, but for reasons we've been talking about, that hasn't been the case. But yeah, just getting up on my screen here, we've seen, I do remember this being one of, I'll talk about top signals in hindsight, but there was a financial instrument put together by one of the larger index operators. They did make a meme coin index, I think throughout last year, and that is now down 90% from its heights there. So the GMCI meme index there for anyone watching on screen. So what's the importance of this? It's just another reminder that, hey, things have gone down quite heavily, particularly in altcoins and even more drastically in meme coins. So what's the significance of this? Hey, from my point of view, I view this as, yes, it's been a brutal reverse wealth effect, really, and I think there's been a lot of pain, and I sort of question how much worse things can get from here, which can be dangerous to say, but I think we're just going to go on quite a few weeks at least of just sort of bouncing around, because yes, while sellers are likely, in my opinion, exhausted, and this is sort of one signal of that, just dramatic crashes in price, I'm also aware that, hey, that net new buyer, there are just a lack of reasons in this environment why they'd be getting involved in things like meme coins or altcoins. But hey, just another data point I just wanted to share with you all before we move on to altcoins.
Well, what's anything that's worse than 90% down in meme coins? It's 95% down in meme coins. And this is the thing, to get to that, though, it's a huge move. It's more like 90 to 98% down. If you bought now, though, to go to 98% down from the top, that's actually another 90% of your portfolio down. So it's huge amounts for it to still go down. But the problem is who's buying, and there's no one there that wants to buy these right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Similarly, altcoins, there's just no real excitement around them from a short-term sort of investing outlook. But still worth monitoring them through these difficult periods. The only thing of note that I had this week, or I suppose just overall, there was an update from the SEC that they delayed a decision on various altcoin sort of spot ETF applications. That news itself was widely expected. The only reason I've just added it into today's episode is there was reporting from CoinDesk, saying that don't expect anything from this SEC in terms of like ETF applications. Some unnamed sources from Washington sort of told CoinDesk that really everything's just waiting on this new SEC chair being officially sort of sworn in Congress, which funnily enough, a date for that still isn't even scheduled yet. So that's Paul Atkins. So anyone, that's just a little bit of information there that I, again, just don't think there will be any approvals or even denials anytime soon in terms of altcoins over there. Only update from any altcoin that I did just see happen overnight was this trend again of another altcoin project sort of building out its own chain. This one here is Athena, and they have partnered with one of the larger companies in the space, and that is Securitize, focusing on sort of tokenized assets. They've been around for quite a while now. They're calling it a new institutional grade EVM chain for tokenized assets. I feel like I've seen quite a number of them over the years. So again, haven't read into points of difference or anything, but I did think it was worth at least highlighting for anyone looking to read and learn more about developments happening in the altcoin space. They have partnered with a few older more established DeFi projects as well. Aave, Ethereal, Maple, Pendle, and Morpho, some of the launch partners there, and some more established industry companies in the industry as well for custody services. So potentially some more utility there for the ENA token. From investing side of things, I still would caution everyone to look at things like the token unlock schedule. A lot of these sorts of newer projects that are now in between, probably more than a year and a half old at this stage, tend to be ones that are really getting into the thick of their unlock schedules. So for those who are newer to crypto, like all of these investors who got ENA allocations and team members who have exposure to ENA often got in at prices that were even much lower than today's market prices. So they're more inclined, they're almost certainly going to sell that ENA once they receive those tokens. As Simon and myself said, there's not really many new demand for altcoins, not much new demand at the moment. So yeah, I think that would more or less lead to prices just bleeding lower. So that's still my outlook on tokens like ENA, but hey, thought this was at least worth mentioning given the names involved.
Yeah, it's more of the names involved that are more interesting to me. But buzzwords like new institutional grade EVM chain for tokenized assets. I mean, that's a mouthful, and they've got to work on their marketing there, because I know what that means. It means just a bunch of BS, really, because what makes it institutional grade? Like, who really cares about that? Like, it's trying to create news from something, but hey, I don't know. I should be marketing maybe and tell these guys what they should actually write there.
Yeah, that's it. I think even these sorts of announcements in many respects don't even probably need to go through the crypto news cycle and Twitter and whatnot, if that's what they're actually targeted at, a crowd that's not on those channels. But anyway, on to biggest news to look forward to for this week, or biggest events, absolutely is Federal Reserve update, as we spoke about at the start of this episode. And Simon, I'll kick it over to you for our rapid fire here on underappreciated or overappreciated. What have you got this week?
Yeah, I think for me in general, it's just that it's underappreciated, but how long this accumulation period may be. So it looks like we may have kind of starting to find a bottom if you go look at the charts, and that coincides with the stock market charts where they actually seem to be steadying. If we start getting some weekly green closes, that's great to see. But I think people need to have an expectation here is that everyone wants this V recovery where prices go straight back up, but I just don't think that rarely happens, especially for the bigger coins like Bitcoin. They don't just have a V-shaped recovery very often. So I think people just need to be prepared for that this could be weeks, if not months, of sideways accumulation. And we've got a Federal Reserve meeting that's coming out, probably could be out by the time this actually is able to be listened to. And then we've got 2 months away. So I kind of think that we're not going to see much macro kind of changes for at least another 2 months until the Federal Reserve come back in May. So that's kind of my expectation of how long I'm thinking that this consolidation could be.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's other factors at play that I think we're not even qualified to talk about, but I think they're at least they're almost known unknowns. And in particular here, I'm talking about like the Ukraine-Russia war that like even I just saw this morning that apparently Trump's meeting with, Russian President Vladimir Putin, tomorrow or something. But again, these are like I feel like I've seen those news headlines like multiple times already. So, hey, there continues to be talk of maybe a peace deal, but very complicated. So those sorts of things will definitely have a market impact. But I think similar to Simon, I would have a default expectation of just information is sort of, base your decision making on current information and adapt accordingly. The underappreciated event or aspect I would have here might just be a sign of market conditions, Simon. I'm actually going to pivot to AI here for a second and and go to NVIDIA with its annual GTC conference. So that's on March 18th. So I would say, I don't know, it's probably underappreciated. I think if anyone from crypto is looking to just, look at a glimpse to see like what's coming in the AI space, which absolutely is overlapping with the use of blockchains in some regard. That's happening about right now throughout this week. So there'll be several announcements I would expect from NVIDIA, and we'll see what they're cooking up. So certainly a sign of us bottoming out that I had to mention that. Yeah,
absolutely. But hey, we know that AI space is big in TradFi and in crypto, so it's an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, for sure. All right, thanks for joining me, Simon, and thanks everyone for listening or watching. If you are looking for more insights from Collective Shift, do see our weekly Shift newsletter. That's free weekly market insights straight to your inbox every Friday. Subscribe at collectiveshift.io/newsletter. That's collectiveshift.io/newsletter.